What are you good at? What motivates you? What are you interested in? Not what other people tell you you should be interested in. What are the things that you think are liabilities that really are assets? What are the things that you're sort of embarrassed to show or say that you worry that you won't fit in? But they're your greatest, that's your arbitrage. And why are you doing that?
On this episode of the Liberty Ventures podcast, I'm joined by the incredible James Rhee, where we not only talk about his new book, Red Helicopter, the inspiration for that, and his call for everyone to find your own red helicopter, your source of wisdom and truth, but also talk about his experience in private equity, in becoming CEO of Ashley Stewart, and leading a company that was floundering to incredible success, both financially and in terms of impact in the world, and provide recommendations for how investors and entrepreneurs can replicate that kind of success by combining kindness and math. Be sure to check this out on this episode of the Liberty Ventures podcast. James, I know that you have an incredibly busy schedule, so thank you so much for taking the time to join the podcast.
For you, anything. It's great to see you again. It's good to see that you're doing well.
And you too, James, not just doing well, you are flourishing right now. But before we get into everything you're up to at the moment, I'd love it if you can just provide everyone else with your personal story, which you go into in Red Helicopter a bit, but just start with what's led to who you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah, I think in some ways, as a 53-year-old guy at this point, I'm much more like I was when I was a kid, except I've accumulated experience and some skill sets. So, look, fundamentally, I think I'm a teacher. I'm literally a former high school teacher, and I'm chairing entrepreneurship at Howard and teaching at MIT and Duke. But even in my private sector times, I've been a teacher, and as a CEO and as a private equity guy. And I think really good teachers are not pedantic. Great teachers actually learn alongside people. Great teachers are relentless in learning new things, so you don't get stale. And so that's that teacher in me. It's what courses through me. I'm the son of two caregivers who have passed away, but one was a pediatrician, one was a nurse. So I take my relationships with people very seriously. I invest in people a lot, um, but I don't take myself that seriously. It's how I relate to other people that I take very seriously. And so yeah, I've had a wide-ranging quote life. I don't really view it as a career, right? So I've done a lot of different things, and it all makes sense to me. And I think at this point in my life where I am, whether it's like the TED Talk or being the CEO of Ashley Stewart or teaching at Howard and MIT, writing this book, producing potentially a movie, it is all the same cloth. And I try to put that all in words in 350 pages or so.
I want to talk about the Red Helicopter story in a moment, but to provide context for everyone else, you're known for being an incredibly successful business leader and perhaps most well known for your turnaround of Ashley Stewart. And I'd love it if you can share a little bit about where Ashley Stewart was, a brand that serves predominantly Black women that you took over and not only saved, but really helped again to flourish.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just to give your listeners context, you're talking to a man, and I'm a Korean American man. And up until that point, in 2013, people identified me. I was a private equity investor, a very successful private equity investor up in Boston. Hadn't really run anything, and Ashley Stewart, I will sort of nitpick with one word. I always say it wasn't a turnaround. The business never really flourished. The people did, but not the business. Our business didn't have Wi-Fi, was bankrupt almost twice at that point, and was sort of a laughingstock business. And so I think that where we were, I did it for 6 months. It ended up being 7 years because of not, the world not really sort of seeing where I thought the world was going to be in 2013. I think the world understands more what I was saying then now. Thus the TED Talk and the book, and people sort of calling me and saying, "Oh, now we understand what you were saying." So I made a big life shift, and it was. I thought the women were very deserving. I thought the business did a lot of very good things in these women's community. Created a lot of positive externalities, not just jobs, but a lot of neighborhood stability. They were bedrock tenants. They created a lot of safety in certain of the strip malls. And the women that it served provided a lot of positive externalities, as women tend to do in their neighborhoods. And this was a place where they could be and be sort of rewarded for their positive externalities in a very safe place. And societally, business does a lot more than make money for people. It does a lot more than make jobs. There's also a zeitgeist and an emotional connection that great businesses do. It's a third rail for a lot of people. And so, yeah, I left. It was sort of shocking to a lot of people. What's this Korean American, Harvard guy, private equity guy? No, I went away and I partnered with millions of Black women, and we pulled off something that I think it's kind of unprecedented in business. I think for your listeners now, it beyond the gender and race and business story, what I was fundamentally telling the world, what I was predicting, and I'm a 19th century humanities person. That's what I study. I study history and economics and philosophy. I was predicting sort of the world that we're in today. I was saying to the world, there will be a potential dystopia, technological dystopia. People will be very lonely. A lot of the science fiction that is now more popular was just emerging as sort of getting rebirth. So, like Margaret Atwood's work was just starting to really get rediscovered. And I studied a lot of antebellum South during my time at Harvard. And so I was very concerned about this country. Um, the language patterns that I was seeing in newspapers and in media, and we all knew where media was going, right? That business model is going to be threatened by the less regulated social media companies. Um, I was concerned about civil war too. And so, against that backdrop, we did what we did, and people really rallied around what we did because they saw what we were doing and said, wow, that's sort of like really good America. It's a bunch of different looking people working together to do something great in the private sector that creates a lot of ancillary benefits in the public sector. That's great. And I said, it is great. Like, come help us. We need it. Anyway, so that's what I did. And we made
So
a lot of money,
that's
by
a
the way.
big.
Yeah. And it was very successful financially. I just want to really add this. It's not just a feel good story. The operating system that we put in place, which I've done in a lot of companies over the years, just more pronounced here because I was also running it. Wasn't just a big owner, I was also running it. It resulted, shocker, that when you do things really well, create a lot of social capital, the capital markets, the financial capital markets tend to reward those companies too. That's not a, you know, shocking statement. And we were rewarded very handsomely.
It shouldn't be shocking. To some people, though, they do think you either have to do good in the world or do well financially and don't think the two are connected. So I'd love if you could say a little bit more about this operating system that you've implemented in other companies and then you ran in implementing at Ashley Stewart, which I think is your kindness plus math philosophy or system.
Yeah, and so like these words, kindness and math, so they like came out of my mouth, as you read the book. So like it was not on purpose. I was in the middle of chaos. I just got down to the company. I'm like everything these women needed, I wasn't. Like, and I'm sitting there, and it was like a bit of the comedy of the absurd, right? I'm an experienced deal guy, so I knew what was about to hit this company. I knew the lawyers and restructuring it, everything is about to hit this company. And that's what popped out of my mouth. I said, listen, it may seem lost and people were angry, like, and I just said, maybe if we could center kindness and math, we can sort of figure out a way to get out of this together. And I remember saying it and saying also, like, oh my gosh, like, what did you just say? Like, when's the last time you said kindness in any setting, particularly in like a professional setting in Bedlam? And then I said math, not finance and not accounting. I said math. And so these two things, in retrospect, they were coming from a very transcendent human, like intuitive place, saying if we can't agree on what kindness is, which we all know what it is, and we can go on and talk about it. For me, as I learned about it, it's not, we all know it's not niceness. We all know it's not the YouTube videos that you're watching. Kindness is like Rousseau and Adam Smith wrote about secular kindness when they designed free markets and like representative democracy. It's about agency. Like kindness is fundamentally you're investing in some other person's agency. So educators, right? Like good leaders invest in other people. That's kindness. And math is math. Like math is science, right? Math requires humility. We discover math. We still don't know all of the mathematical algorithms that are defining our universe. We're discovering them. And so these two things, kindness and math, they transcend us, right? It's like universal law, it's natural law. Um, and I know for your listeners, I'm a business guy, but I'm obviously using very humanistic terms that were used in the 18th and 19th centuries, right? This is what we designed our great country, our systems based on. So that's what I did. So that's kindness and math. So fundamentally is like, how do you connect these two things? How do you design an operating set of systems and measure the correct things, not accounting, but the correct mathematical measurements that prime people in sort of a Kahneman sort of way to behave in a pro-social, positive and externality way and create value. That's what kindness and math is. That's what Red Helicopter is. And again, not shocking when you design a system that motivates people to sort of look after their own best interest and the best interest of a collective, a mutualistic system. Does it surprise anyone that you create a culture and an operating system that thrives? Doesn't surprise me.
So this would be implemented in different ways in different businesses, but you're articulating this in a way that I haven't heard from you before, actually, that kindness is fundamentally about agency and supporting other people's agency, recognizing it, respecting it. And then the math part is making sure that you're tracking the right things in the world, counting them, and aligning people's agency with what really matters for the business. Is that about right?
That's right. I mean, in the book, I give an example, a sports analogy, right? And some people don't love the measurement, but I talk about in ice hockey, the plus minus ratios. You could have a very high plus minus ratio, which is the amount of goals that are scored when you're on the ice minus the amount of goals that are scored against you when you're on the ice. There's some other permutations. That's fundamentally what it is. So you could have an incredibly high plus minus ratio, but never score a goal. But when you're on the ice, the team wins. So I design systems, whether that's day-to-day managerial systems or compensation systems or promotion systems that identify, reward those type of players. And these are intangible benefits. The whole book and my TED Talk and Red Helicopter is about, and this is what you do as a good investor and as a good human, you find things that other people can't see because we're all primed to take shortcuts and see the obvious. But as an investor or anybody, you're supposed to create real alpha. You're supposed to see things that other people can't see. That's why people give you money to invest, right? Or you see something in someone's self-worth that because you believe in them and you really invest in them, you bring out the best in somebody. That's also creating alpha. And so that's what it is. I mean, it's again, it's not like profound, but what I'm saying to a lot of people is, and this people always giggle when I say this, I've managed billions of dollars of money. I'm very respectful of the accounting systems. But just for your listeners, remember, everybody, accounting is 100% made up. It's a convention, right? We have designed a system to compare companies. That's all it is. It's all very arbitrary. What's the best way to compare companies? Well, we need an income statement. Okay, great. You need a balance sheet. Great. Is it 1 year? Sure. Well, let's pick 1 year. And that's a long-term asset and that's a long-term, it's all arbitrary. So accounting doesn't measure most human related intangible things because it's quote immeasurable. And for good reason, they say we can't have immeasurable things in our audited financial statements. And so what I'm asking your listeners to say, that's a true statement, but on the day-to-day of how you manage your business, if you are relying on GAAP, those measurements to incentivize and your people, then you're making a mistake. It's you're sort of being primed into thinking accounting meant to help motivate and operationalize people.
So I want to build on that and connect it actually with your references to philosophy and the humanistic studies before, because if everything is fundamentally made up by us and how we understand businesses, then taking a philosophical approach and being able to conceptualize what really matters, what's actually valuable, is critical then to figuring out what matters in the business and looking at it differently.
Yeah, I think what did they say with Steve Jobs? Was it reality distortion field or something like this? I think to make it even more accessible, it's I've tried to live my life like Harold in the Purple Crayon. Like I just sort of go about life and I imagine things. I'm like, okay, well, I think that this is where things could be based on history and my understanding and things, but I'm never locked into history. Like that, what's the point of that? You have to be respectful of it. But if all we're doing is putting people in binary zeros and ones, it's a pretty boring life. You're not going to make a great entrepreneur either, right? To not be able to imagine a future that other people can't see. So that's what I do. It's like when you are sort of living like this in natural laws, you look for a lot of inspiration from like nature, right? You get very comfortable with chaos because nature is chaotic, right? You can't control things. You get very respectful of things like system dynamics. You understand that nature generally runs in closed feedback loops, that it constantly strives to have homeostasis, and that to get people to change, to see a different way, to change their behavior, that's hard. How do you get people to sort of adapt something new, to see something new? When you think of it this way, in the sort of the laws of nature, and then apply it to business, I believe you create a business that is operating much more according to the laws of nature, which is a much more of a concept of oneness. Like people feel much more comfortable at work because you're not creating cognitive dissonance. You're basically saying, look, I know what you're like as a human. Like I studied your brain. I know how you're wired. I know how your parasympathetic system's wired. I get it. So I'm going to ask you to work in a work environment like that, right? I'm not going to do it by fear, right? I'm not going to do it by triggering like some adrenaline rush every 2 minutes. I'm not going to threaten you. I'm going to really try to trigger your sort of vagus nerve and parasympathetic system. You can feel very calm. And when you're calm and you're not fearful, you're going to have much more readily access to your best and highest functioning brain functions to create something exceptional, to actually think. So there's a lot of science involved in here. This is physics, science, like neuroscience. It's kindness. It's these are things that are just transcend business systems. If you look at the history of a lot of great entrepreneurs, a lot of them have done this. So like Vanguard is successful. He was laughed at. Bogle was laughed at for Vanguard, and Vanguard designed a truly mutualistic system because he said, "How can we offer mutual funds when we are ourselves are not designed as a mutual company?" It doesn't make any sense. And I don't have to comment on the success of Vanguard. I still think to this day they're like the only true mutual company in mutual funds. So, and obviously, like people like Steve Jobs, like he used to sort of get very sort of irritated when people said, "Oh, Apple's a computer company" early on. He's like, "No, it's not. It's a philosophy company. It's a design company, and the first product you happen to be seeing is a computer." And the rest is history, right? There's most, if you look, I can keep going on. Most great business, there is a philosophy underlying it, and then you build an operating system that's consistent with that philosophy. It has to be consonant, like it has to be, or else it doesn't work. It doesn't scale properly, and you end up having to raise a lot more money than you really want, give up ownership, and then that creates a whole other ridiculous dynamic when you have a bunch of moneyed interests on your board who really don't understand what you're doing, and then you waste time like dealing with them. And I know that because I'm an investor, right? Like I want to, for me, the agency part, best investors, they nudge, they are available for advice, but they get out of the entrepreneur's way, right? They promote that entrepreneur's agency. That's what great investors do.
100%. And I want to help any entrepreneurs listening think through how to develop their own philosophy with this by understanding the origins of your philosophy, because it doesn't just come from your business, it literally comes from your experience as a kid as well, the story of the red helicopter. So I would love it if you could share that with everyone now.
Sure. And there's a reason why, this book is going nuts right now because it's not a prescriptive book. So there's no picture of that red helicopter on the cover of the book. So for your listeners, I'm asking you while I'm telling the story, really what I'm doing throughout the book, there's a reason why it's a parable. What's your red helicopter story, right? That's what I'm asking you. And it helps with founders and origin stories. And so, yeah, my red helicopter story literally was a red helicopter, but yours will be different, right? So for me, um, before I go into the actual story, what it is, what you're going to hear, it's just this intuitively wise, truthful story that captures the essence of you and the essence of the truth that you're trying to find. Because all of us are really just searching for truth. Like it's a life's journey finding truth. So for me, I was 5, and I'll do this quickly. I came home from kindergarten, and my parents noticed I had a toy red helicopter. And then it was a series of like false accusations. Like sometimes when you find truth, you think you're wrong. There's a lot of doubt, right? I can't possibly be right. And all you startup founders, listen, you know this, right? People say, you're crazy. It's never going to work. And you got to be persistent in this. You have to be. And so they thought I took it from school. Then they thought they did something wrong because, like, my parents were immigrants. So they thought they didn't understand that I was supposed to give other kids red helicopters. And then they found out why I got it. And they were mad that I didn't understand why I got it. And they said, oh, you know, I, you're sharing half your lunch at kindergarten with the boy. Why are you doing that? And then I thought I was in trouble again because maybe I'm not supposed to share my lunch. It wasn't like the Rhee family was like burning $20 bills in 1976. Like it wasn't easy. Like my dad was a small business owner. And anyway, so like they found out why I did it. It was that I was sharing my lunch, and the kid was one of my good friends in kindergarten. He rarely had lunch, and so I would share my lunch with him. And his dad and brothers came in to give me this toy and to say thank you. And I thought I was in trouble. And my dad looked at me. He's like, "You think you're in trouble? You're not in trouble." He's like, "Don't forget this." And so that truth, it was so obvious to me because I remember looking at my dad. I'm like, I didn't do anything that great. My friend didn't have lunch. I gave him some of my lunch. Like, what's the big deal? And that confidence, that sort of just, it's obvious what the answer is. We tend to lose that. It gets buried under a bunch of need for external validation, um, degrees, where you mistake education for actually true wisdom. Um, you can, as an adult, you can come up with 500 reasons why I shouldn't have done what I did, right? Oh, that boy, too bad for him. I brought my lunch, he didn't. Sucks for him. It turns out his mom had died that summer. His dad was a single dad with 4 kids under the age of 10. I'm sure in retrospect, being a dad now, his family was like, I can't even imagine, right? Like what was going on. And so that was it. Like for me, I've always wanted to have that level of clarity and conviction in truth. And what I did was wise. And I think how I approached Ashley Stewart was wise. Um, and but I used the tools that I had picked up in law school and private equity and whatnot to be able to execute on that truth without distorting it. And what you're seeing happen right now with Red Helicopter, the book, everything that's going on media wise and how it's spreading, truth spreads. Like when something is correct, particularly now when truth is so hard to discern, truth spreads and it's for free, right? And that's what I am, I think, pretty good at, right? I give advice and sort of help people spread brands and truth that I believe in, that they believe in, and you also consequentially don't have to raise a whole lot of money with expensive marketing dollars, right? To come up with stories that aren't true. Anyway, yeah, that's the story.
So I think that's such a powerful story of you finding the truth and starting to develop wisdom from a young age. For other founders, other investors, anyone listening, how might they go about figuring out what their red helicopter story is? What advice would you give them?
I think we all have one. I think in the cold light of day, when you're home alone and you're like staring at the mirror, you know who you are, or you're pretty honest with yourself. I think you need to be honest with yourself. It all starts with yourself. It's a lot of self work. I'm like, what do you want to? What are you good at? What motivates you? Like, what are you interested in? Not what other people tell you you should be interested in. What are you interested in? What are the things that you think are liabilities that really are assets? What are the things that you're sort of embarrassed to show or say that you worry that you won't fit in? But they're your greatest, that's your arbitrage. Like, and why are you doing that? So a lot of this, there's a lot of philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, Taoist philosophy, Emersonian and Whitman philosophy infused in this book, right? It's individualism that's not narcissistic, right? It's sort of just knowing yourself. And then once you know yourself, you'd be amazed at how clear your perspective is on the landscape that is the world. You have very little bias. You can see things very clearly. And I think the second part, then, after you do that, while you're doing that, you have to fix and address a problem that actually is real. Like, do something that's really great for people, great for humanity, right? Like, do something, like, fix something that bothers you. And you generally should be asking, it should be a problem where you're staring in the mirror and saying, am I the only freaking person who thinks this is ridiculous that the world works this way, right? It's so obvious what the solution is. Like, why isn't anyone doing it? And it should sort of irritate you a little bit, right? It should be irritating. It's like, what are we doing? And we all know the reason why things don't happen. It's like ego, politics, people fighting, or whatever the heck it is, right? Entrenched interests. And then if you have both those two things, like it's very clear why you're interested in something, you find a problem that's just gets under your skin a little bit, and then you become relentless in solving it. And you're not doing it with money. You have to first do it sort of intellectually, socially, mind share, and persuasion. Can you really articulate the story that people actually will listen to you and pay attention to what you're saying, right? There are you know this, there are cajillion things that distract us that will catch your interest. Will you listen? Will people listen to you? And that brain science is very clear, right? In order for people to listen to you, um, you have to sort of catch their not just rational thinking, but their emotional interest. They have to care, right? They have to have both. They have to want you to be successful. And I say this in my book. That's the best piece of advice my dad gave me. It took me a long time to understand that. He said, you'll never be successful, truly, until the day and unless other people are really thrilled for your success. And it's a very profound statement. It used to annoy the crap out of me. I'm like, what the heck's that mean? Right? But it's a profound statement, right? It means you've done something that one solves a problem for many, and the way in which you did it was conducive to that problem solving, right? It brought out the best in people. Like you didn't obliterate people. You weren't like a jerk. Like just the way you did it. And I obviously I've lost both my parents at this point, and I took that to heart. And I think I applied a lot of those value systems in my 40s to the situation I was working on, and I continue to do it now and encourage others to do it. And I have a system that will help other people do it too.
James, I know that others are listening to you and that I and so many others are rooting on your success with this because it is so inspiring and so valuable right now. Before we wrap this up, I want to see if there's anything else that you want to share with the Liberty Ventures community.
I think I would say this. So two things. So one is more like an encouragement, but just a reminder. I love this country. I know most of your listeners are global, but most of them are probably U.S. citizens or living in America. Like, we're at an interesting place in this country, and I think that let's not forget that real real freedom, great societies encourage agency and for people to make decisions that are informed and best for themselves, and at the same time, not oxymoronically, and in a way that creates a better mutualistic we. It's an and, right? And I think that's what I think entrepreneurship increasingly is sort of, we think about the one person against the world and I'm going to win, destroy. That's not that's not how this country was built. As much as we want to sort of say that, there was a lot of mutual, like, towns and communities really hung together. And so I would ask everyone to remember that. And if you want real proof of it, look at the insurance industry right now and how it's just completely just evaporating. You have an industry that they're not interested in insuring collective risk. And I just want to remind everyone that living a rogue solo life can get very expensive. Like, if you're insuring all of your own risk, you better be freaking exceptional. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I think read the book. Tell me what you think. There's a lot of things coming. I hope you all can sort of close your eyes and picture where this is all going. It's not a coincidence that I'm a first time author. The book opened up as the number one nonfiction book in the United States of America. It's ridiculous, but that's not happenstance, right? So, do I think that there's a movie coming? Do I think there are many books, TV show? Yeah. Do I think that there's a whole network that it's built in for to help the companies and entrepreneurs I invest in to access instantaneous revenue and influence? Yeah, that's what I'm building. It's to reward entrepreneurs and founders that lead in this way. And I hope to hear from you. And lastly, like, I'm proud of you. Like, I've really enjoyed our relationship, and you're doing some really good things. And it's not easy what you're doing, and you're really making great strides. And I admire the way that you're doing it. So keep doing it.
Well, James, I really appreciate that. I've been admiring you for years now, and you're an inspiration for me. And I hope everyone here does go and read Red Helicopter, gets more inspired. And if you want to reach out to James, reach out to me, and I can share his info with you. But James, really, congratulations on all the success with the book. Keep being amazing, and thanks for joining us today.
All right, man. Talk to you soon. Thank you.